This is the final video about good requirements properties. A lot was reviewed in the first and the second video, and the only thing left is ranking for importance, stability and priority. So what is it all about? The importance shows how the project success depends on the success of the implementation of this specific requirement. Of course, there are more and less important requirements, and we absolutely should have a ranking in order to concentrate all our attention on the most important ones. Because if we fail with those important requirements, it usually means the failure of the whole project. But if we somehow fail with some non-important requirements, usually it's bad, but it's not extremely bad, it's not a disaster. The stability shows us that in the nearest foreseeable future this requirement will or will not be changed. Why is it important? Because when we have a lot of requirements, we should know which to start with from the beginning. For instance, imagine that we have two sets of requirements. How to choose? Maybe we should start with this one or with that one. Okay, if we see that this is stable and this is not stable, we should begin with this one. Because while we are working with this set of requirements, that set of requirements may be changed, even changed several times. So then we finish with this and start with this, but imagine what happens if we start with this non-stable requirement set. We rework them, make them good, and then suddenly they changes. So we start again, make them good, and they change again, and again, and again, and again. While these good requirements are lying on the shelf, waiting for us. So we should start with a stable requirement. And the priority shows what a requirement should be implemented earlier or later in time. Imagine a timeline schedule. Of course, the customer wants some requirements to be implemented earlier, and he could wait with some other. If we know the priority of any requirement, we know when to work with this requirement. Typical problems here are obvious: no ranking or incorrect ranking, maybe, or outdated ranking data. So, if there is trouble with ranking, we got a lot of trouble with schedule, with our work prioritizing, and even with the success of the project itself. And how to find out if there are any problems with importance, stability or priority? Review, review, and review. And review requirements, especially with participation of the customer. During such reviews, we may detect that some values for importance, stability or priority are no longer correct, and then we shall repeat such a review periodically in order to keep our requirements properties like importance, stability, priority in good state. How to fix? Make corrections during the review. That's quick, that's easy. That requires almost no effort. Just change some value in some drop down, or in some text field maybe there was value A, it will become value B, and so on. And the final central idea: correctness, verifiability. We should know, is it possible to create objective test cases that clearly show that the requirement is implemented correctly and the behavior of the application is exactly as it is described in the requirements. So what typical problems may be here? All those properties from previous videos and from this video also. If any of those problems arise, in those properties. If any property is violated, the requirement most likely become incorrect and unverifiable, bad requirement. How to understand that we have problems with the central idea here? Of course, we are dealing with integral problem here, so we can use any methods described earlier in previous two and in these videos. There is no any unique approach here. How to make necessary changes in the requirements? Usually this is the only way. Of course, we may correct some typos or we may even rewrite the whole requirement set sometimes, but of course that's not a desirable outcome. So in order to avoid such whole requirement set rewriting, we should maintain the health of our requirements, keeping them all good all the time and hopefully avoiding that global rewriting. Let's review the big picture once again. We were just talking about correctness and verifiability, that's the central idea. Those other ideas, those other properties that are linked are usually somehow related to each other. For instance, you may remember that modifiability comes from traceability, that obligation and up-to-date states are usually treated like two parts of the same one bigger thing. And ranking, all those three ranking types are connected. And one more idea. If you see all those good properties mentioned here, you may understand, you may see that these are not only good properties of a good requirement, but these are good properties of almost any good document. Of course, when we are speaking about test cases or defect reports or any other software testing artifact, there will be specific properties. But these properties, nevertheless, are applicable to almost any document, any artifact. And a simple conclusion here, to memorize the main idea. We are specialists in software testing. So if we cannot verify a requirement, if we cannot create good test cases to check a requirement, we have a problem. So testers are responsible for ensuring that any requirement is verified. And so we have to know a way to verify it. So any requirement has to be good, with no good property violated. And just check yourself, did you notice the typo here? Of course, it should be it. And so, that's all about good requirement properties.